Antoine here from Riot Games, who's going to talk about how he made the language of ISO for Assassin's Creed Valhalla. So everyone, please give him a round of applause.
Hey everyone, thanks for being there, taking some time of your hard work on your games to listen to me. Hopefully that's going to be interesting, maybe a bit insightful as well. So a bit about me for starters. So I'm the manager for the design department for Riot Singapore and Riot Hong Kong. But prior to this, I spent 15 years at Ubisoft, which is why I'm going to talk about Assassin's Creed. So these are a bunch of games that I've worked on. But one thing about me that is not on this slide is that I'm also a linguistic enthusiast. Have been for many, many years now. And I'm very passionate about languages, studying them, see how they work, but also creating them, which I've started to do as a hobby like some 15 years ago or something. And then I've had the opportunity, luckily, to create languages professionally. So the first one was for Griffon, which is an action RPG by Splatter's Game. Then one for Curse of the Dead Gods, which is a roguelike by Pasta Games. And then I created a language for the ISO civilization in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, working with Sam over there and Andy as well. That was quite nice of an experience. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. We are going to go over first the experience that players had, right? It's like, I don't know if all of you know about this language and the place it had in the game and what players experience. So we're going to look at that first. Then I'll go into the design of the language and the puzzle that goes with it, because it was actually designed as a puzzle. So there's really like a game experience as well as a lore experience, and that's what's so interesting to me, I think. And then some key learnings that hopefully you can use in your future projects. I doubt very much that the project you're working on right now will be able to use that, but let's see. All right, so let's start with the experience. If you played Assassin's Creed Valhalla, this is something that you will have experienced, and every player who played it experienced that.
The markings of the ancient ones, the gods begat of gods.
I've seen this somewhere. I know these words. What does it say, Sigurd? Does it speak to you? Yes. But the words are forked, giant. And yet I feel them. And the ash tree. I see the great tree of life. The boughs you can see. Sky. Open plain.
The space above. The sagas not set there, did it not?
Long, long ago, yes. Now stand here. Sparkling on vat, spämbro, turvonti vorde, solas bras, knokatine, sukuras reisterae, hasaus.
Where did you learn these words?
I told you, my visions are memories of a life once lived. Come.
Zawahoi Nakwat, Uzme Burtuwanti Kwate, Ula Solas Bras Hunakudide, Zukuras, Detereras, Zohusi.
All right, so to sum things up, there is Eivor, the Viking in the Viking Age, finding a big stone with some weird engravings on it, and her brother Sigurd sees these writings and is like, I kind of understand what they mean, but not quite, and I don't really know why. And then later on, they go to Norway, and in that place, Sigurd is able to remember these words, and he's pronouncing them, and that's what's opening the big door. It's a passphrase of sorts. And then in present day, we have Layla, who is the character in the animus reliving the memory of Eivor Viking. And now that she knows the passphrase from Sigurd, then she's able in present day to go to the same place in Norway, speak the phrase, open the door, and there she is. Right? So that's basically what every single player playing Valhalla has experienced, because this is part of the main story. All right, let's try to get to the next slide if I can. Yeah, okay, but that is not all. As you explore the game and you go to different places, you can find vaults from an ancient civilization called the Isu, and there you can find other writings, right? That's an example of them. There's a bunch of them in the game. And every time you can interact with them and see them close up if you need to, right? But obviously it's all written in these weird glyphs that you do not understand. You find more of these a bit everywhere. There's actually an order during the Viking Age that is studying and collecting these artifacts, that is studying what these scriptures are. So this order is called the Order of the Ancient. And these are people that worship this ancient civilization called the Isu. Right? So they are trying to study it, they are trying to see what they mean. And as a player in the present day, playing as Layla, you also have access to your laptop. And then when you send all of these findings through the story of the game to the Assassin Order, then there's one character who happened to be a linguist within the Assassin Order, and that is able to decipher this text, and actually sending more pictures of more of these small excerpts of text found throughout the world, right? So in different sites of that ancient civilization, they find more scriptures, and this linguist assassin is able to decipher them, translate them for the player. So now as a player, you see tons of scriptures, some of them are even translations from that assassin linguist, and some do not. But that's not all. As you continue to play the game, you start to see the scriptures a bit everywhere. There's one particular trophy or achievement, depending on your platform, that also has that sort of like weird glyphs on them, called the Hidden Truth. And if you are a major fan of the game and you purchase the super cool collector's edition, there were a lot of things on there that you could find as well. If you open your steel case, in close-up, you can see that there are actually more inscriptions in there. On the main box itself, there's kind of like a weird word or a set of glyphs that's there as well. If you look beneath the box is also, and it's gone. All right, back. Another sentence in these weird glyphs. If you look at the sleeve for the CD for the OST, like anyone is playing CDs anymore, but anyways, you have like some weird chemical formulas that are hidden in there. And cool little trivia is like, this is an actual printing error that actually went to players. So it's like this was the placeholder for the actual title of the tracks, and there was a problem with the printer, and they actually sent this to players for it. Small little trivia. Anyways, on the CD itself, which again no one is ever going to play because who does, but you still have it as part of your collector's edition, and then there's more inscription on the CD itself. And then there's 3 super cool little graphs, which look super cool. And then on the back of them, you have the name of the artist, and then this weird thing at the bottom, right? And players were very quick to realize that if you assemble them, there it forms another word, or at least like 3 glyphs, right? So you assemble them together, that's what you get. And obviously, seeing all of this on the collector's edition got players very, very curious, right? What is this about? What does that mean? Is this something that, is it a puzzle for us? Does that mean something? Can we read this thing? And so people started to get together, assemble on Reddit, on different forums, communities, and they started to see patterns. They started to see that, oh, some things are repeated, and I can start to see how it works. And then some people saw that some of the things connected to maybe numbers, and then some players started to try and decipher what's the numbering system and how the alphabet works and all of this. And everyone got together for several months. And so the game got released in November something? Help me please, I don't know. Let's say November-ish, right? More or less. And then a few months passed of players trying to decipher things for a few weeks, being blocked, and then finding another breakthrough, and then continuing with their deciphering, until one day in January, where one collective of Italian players who accessed the Animus cracked the language completely. They were able to read it, they were able to understand what it means. They were able to, through comparison of different texts and different things, piece together the meaning of all of the text, including the ones that were not provided with translations. And doing this, and I'll explain later how this works, right? It's like, oh, you have like a word here, another one here, so I know this means inside, so I know that on the CD this means inside, etc. I'll go through this sort of game mechanics that I've put in there. But basically, through all of this comparison, they were able to identify that something was hidden inside, right? Hidden inside is the text that's on the CD. But what is hidden inside what? Players didn't know until another group of players found out that all these chemical formulas there were chemical formulas for an actual mineral that is obsidian. And obsidian glass is something that exists in the game that you can break. So now hidden inside obsidian becomes a thing. All right? And so they continue to decipher the text, and they realize that there's a text under the box that says the sword is the key. The box happened to have a sword hidden within the visual of a crow, or a raven maybe. And this sword happens to be Excalibur. And if you play the game, that's a sword that you can find in the game. So now it says the sword is the key, the sword is very obviously Excalibur, and then you know that something is hidden inside obsidian glass. Through other clues, they were able to find out that there's a whole numeral system. It's a hexadecimal numeral system. And using that numeral system and the steel box, they were able to create a grid, which, if you use the binary version of these numbers, creates the picture of a lake that has a very conspicuous shape, as you can see. And so now you know that there's a lake where something is hidden inside obsidian, and the sword is the key, the sword being Excalibur. Now the last part of the puzzle is, when should you do this? And this is where it comes. That word that you see there, people were able to decipher that it means now. And as you cover the word, you cover the sun, right? And so because of this, players came to that particular obsidian rock that is exactly on that island, on that lake, and exactly at the moment where the sun sets, you equip Excalibur, hit the rock, and then you get Nodon's Arc, which is the most powerful bow in the game. So that's basically the experience that players went through, deciphering the language. And after this, obviously, you can imagine that people went crazy about it, right? Content creators creating videos about it, articles being written about it. This was a whole shebang. The entire community going to that particular rock at that particular time on that particular lake using Excalibur, getting that super exclusive bow, right? Everyone doing that. And so that was the first step for us. But that wasn't the last step. Later on, within a trailer for a next upcoming DLC, we hid in the audio track of the trailer some inscriptions and words that you can see as well. And if you decipher this, then you're able to basically translate the meaning of these words, and that gives you a translation for what's written on the gate that is right there, and that gives you like a really, really strong clue on what is going to happen in that particular DLC, which players were very, very excited about. But that wasn't the end of it. Next, in the Siege of Paris DLC, which is a DLC that was developed in Ubisoft Singapore, we hid some text that were encrypted, but if you decrypt them, they were written in Latin, and if you can read Latin, it was giving you locations, 3 locations that you can use to triangulate a particular location. And if you go there, you could get to a hidden cave. Within that hidden cave was hidden another piece of text. This piece of text had an indication and coordinates. These coordinates players figured out are real-life coordinates to the real location of that place in Paris, in Saint-Denis, the northern part of Paris. And some French players actually went to the Basilica where we hid a plate with a QR code And that QR code gave them access to an exclusive video with more text that they could translate and gave them super exclusive access to some piece of lore that are very well hidden within the Assassin's Creed franchise. Right. So that's the whole journey. That's what players experience with that language.
Assassin's Creed part de live.
All right. So now that you know what players experience, let's talk about the design of it. Right. What went through, and it all started actually with a few drinks back in Montreal, Canada. So that was during a trip that we did during Conception, where I went there with a bunch of people from Ubisoft Singapore. And on one evening, we were having a bunch of drinks with Darby McDevitt, the narrative director. And he was telling me how it would be so cool to create a language for the Isu civilization, and that's something that he thought about for a while. And I was like, dude, it's like, I'm super passionate about linguistics. I've created languages before. It's like, let's make it happen, right? And he got super excited, and he was like, yeah, let's do it. And then, we had a few more drinks, went back to the hotel, and then the next day we had like meetings after meetings, the day after meetings after meetings. We did not talk about it anymore. And then 1 month later, I was like, this is it, right? It's like, this was just like a fun, excited discussion that sometimes creative people have. But then, about like a month and a half later, he came back to me and the creative director as well, saying, hey, remember that discussion we had in the bar the other day? It's like, what does it take to make it happen? I was like, dude, for real? Let's go. And so we started with defining 3 design goals. Right? What did we want to do if we were going to create a language for the Isu? First one was to tell a story. We did not want this to just be like a nice novelty thing, right? Oh, it's like there's some inscriptions on the wall, nice, right? It's like we wanted this to be something that would add to the lore and to the story and to the mythos of Assassin's Creed. Second one is, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is the 13th game in the main series, plus like all the side series and the books and everything. The lore is very extensive, and we wanted to make sure that it doesn't feel like we are adding a new thing that people will feel is tacked on. We wanted to make sure that it feels like it's always been there, you just didn't know about it. So we wanted to make sure that it works with the existing lore. And then the third one is, why make a fully functional language, which is tons of work, if no one can tell the difference between that and gibberish, right? So players had to be able to decipher it. And this is where this idea of making a very advanced puzzle with it came together, right? Because again, like you can create the most complicated and interesting language in the world. If basically it's the same as generating random syllables, then what's the point, right? It's like from a player's perspective, my experience is not different if I cannot tell, right? So we wanted to make sure to have that difference and to basically allow players to see how much depth we've added. Right? And that's something, for example, that I think is very unique to our medium and could have been done to a certain extent, but there's a lot of series now that, like Game of Thrones is one of them, right, where they use like actual languages created by an actual linguist. But honestly, they could speak gibberish and it would be the same way, because you have subtitles and you don't really need to understand whatever they say. All right. So what is that story that we wanted to tell? Well, you could probably think that it's what I talked about, right? It's like, oh, you have this stone, there's weird inscriptions on it, and then, oh, someone remembers from a past life sort of what the words are, and then speaks them, and then in present days, now that I have this information, I can go and open the door. That is not a story. That is a plot device. Right? You could do this with an artifact. Actually, every single Assassin's Creed game has done that with an artifact. Right? It's like all Assassin's Creed games are always about exploring the memories of your ancestor to find some sort of a magical artifact or technological artifact, and then in the present days go and fetch it. So it's like, that is a plot device, that is not a story. What is the story that we wanted to tell? Well, in Assassin's Creed mythos, I don't know if all of you know this, but there is this ancient civilization, as I said, called the Isu, and these beings created humanity. They basically manipulated their own DNA to create humans. And they created humans to actually do labor, to be slaves, right? So this is something that has been established in Assassin's Creed 2, has been developed a lot throughout the years and everything. And we thought that if we were going to create a language for these ancient beings, then maybe we can help tell some of that story, or at least add to it, add interesting parts to that story. And so the way that I thought about this really is, if we are going to create a language for these ancient beings, and they created humans, and humans have the capacity of speech, right? Most likely they would have taught them some of their language, right? Because they had to communicate with their slaves to give them orders or whatever, right? So it is possible that by them teaching humans their own language, humans would keep that and have it evolve over millennia and millennia to become actual modern human languages, right? And so what we did is I decided to take the Proto-Indo-European family of languages and create a fictional ancestor to it, right? So that way you could tell the story through the language itself, through the way it's, the words and everything. You could tell the story of Isu evolving into Proto-Indo-European, evolving into all these languages. And why this family of language, as opposed to, I don't know, like Malayo, Polynesian, or other big families? For two reasons. One is like this is the biggest family of languages on Earth. Two is this is where the biggest part of the player base for Assassin's Creed is. It's like the majority of Assassin's Creed players talk a version of these languages. So that's why we picked this one over other families. All right, so concretely, what does that mean? Let me give you an example. If you start from mother, English word, modern English, the Middle English version of that word was mother. The Old English version of that word was moder. The Proto-Germanic ancestor of that word was moder. The Proto-Indo-European version of that word was marter. And I created an ancestor to this using basically, you see, right, it's like you can see a pattern of how things evolve, right? It's like there are rules to T's softening, becoming D's, and then the vowels shifting and everything, right? It's like these are processes in linguistics that are well known. I basically applied them backwards and tried to find something like marter, right? So mother, mother, meder, marter, marter. Right? And so this is basically how I created the entire vocabulary, by retro-engineering what an ancestor could have been. Obviously it's a theory, right? It's like there's many paths that this could have taken, but that's... And so when you see the word marter, there is something in it that rings a bit like mother. And with the context and everything, some people can pick it up. And for this one, I took an example from like a Germanic language, but I took some of these paths from the Latin, other from Greek, other from Sanskrit, etc. Right? So like all families within the Proto-Indo-European, so that a large range of players could pick up on different words. Right? Okay, so that's one example of the way we integrated in the lore. The second one is there is something very established in the franchise, and that is this idea that the Isu civilization had a sixth sense, right? A way to perceive intent. And some humans have inherited some of it through their DNA, and that's what we call eagle vision. Right? It's like when you see an enemy highlighted in red, it's obviously for gameplay reasons, but within the lore is because you can perceive he intended people, like you can read intent. And so what would be a language where people that speak that language can actually see intent the same way that you see, colors and shapes and everything like that, right? Would you need, for example, to say, you must do this, right? It's like your interlocutor knows your intent for imperative, right? You must, they can see it because they can see your intent. So the language itself does not have modals at all. Does not have must, should, can, any of this. Because that's something that you can see from the person speaking, right? So it makes no sense for a language to have that. So this is like small clues that we've put in the language itself, the way it's engineered, to tell the story and the lore of the people that spoke it. Obviously, all of this is very subtle, so to be slightly less subtle, as I said, right, we created this linguist assassin character that is communicating through Layla's laptop, and there's a bunch of exposition that basically is there so that people can pick up on these hints, right? It's like we did not expect people to, deconstruct the language to see that, oh, there's no models in the language, that must mean that they have a sixth sense, and like we kind of like spell it out somehow, within expository text, which is basically dialogue between Layla and that character. All right. So that's it for like the story and how we made it part of the story. Now for the working within the existing lore, in Assassin's Creed 2 is the first time that you see inscriptions that are attributed to the Isu civilization, and that's on the staff of the staff of Eden, which is wielded by the Pope. But right after this sequence, there's a sequence where you enter like some sort of a hidden vault, and there's inscriptions on the walls that are nothing like it. Right? It's like very different. And then in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, you have other glyphs that are on the ceilings, and then this becomes like really a staple of Isu civilization. In future games, many games use that like sort of hexagon kind of shapes, and they are supposed to be a language as well. They are referred to as a language in the game. But then next, in Assassin's Creed Origins, they use different types of glyphs. And then in Assassin's Creed Brotherhood and Revelations, they use different kinds of glyphs that were reused in Unity but not in other games. And then in Assassin's Creed Liberations, they use different kinds of glyphs. And then in Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue, they used another set of glyphs, and so on and so forth. Basically, for every single game, artists were coming up with cool-looking glyphs, putting them on their art, right, like their textures and everything, without ever referencing previous games. So, with my goal of making something that would work within the existing established lore, basically I had to somehow figure out something that would work with everything, right? It's like, how come there are so many different types of glyphs when there's really just one language? How come if we created a real language using these glyphs, people would go back to older games and try to decipher it and realize that actually it was never a language in the first place. This is a new thing. Clearly, they did not think about this for a long time. So we didn't want any of that, right? And so it was a bit of a nightmare for me to kind of retcon everything, and I did actually. It's like I created a whole backstory for why there are so many different glyphs and everything, which is not fully exposed in the game, but now that we have it, it can be exposed in future games. But there's one thing that I used that was my point of entry. Right? As I said, in Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue, there's a new type of glyph that was introduced, but this one was a reference to a real-life manuscript called the Voynich manuscript. The Voynich manuscript is a real manuscript that exists, right? That uses a form of language that, to this day, has still not been deciphered. People don't know how to read this, people don't know what this means, to this day, even using AI and stuff like that. But what is very cool is that in the game, what they said is that, oh, it's actually encrypted, and so you need like a precursor box, which is an artifact, right, in order to decrypt it. So basically, here I am with a bunch of text that no one can read, but the game says it's normal, you cannot read it, is because it's encrypted. So I'm like, okay, so that means that people can also write this way in a non-encrypted way. And that I can come up with and invent completely, and it's not incompatible with what's already established, and it works. And that's exactly what I did, actually. So it's like I just isolated all of these characters, assigned them different sounds that I needed for the language that I created, and there I am with a whole new text written in real Isu language this time, or at least the one I created, right? So this one is a non-encrypted version of the Voynich manuscript. And so this is it. This is a full text written in the Isu language. But it looks exactly like the Voynich manuscript, and that's how it works. And then from there, I use the same logic as any language has an alphabet that evolves over time, right? So from Roman letters to the type of letters that they would write with a quill, because it was more practical to make it evolve this way. But basically, from these characters that I took from the Voynich manuscript and repurposed to use for my own use, I de-evolved them using natural evolution processes for handwriting, but backwards. And then I came up with that alphabet, which is the Isu alphabet. And that's the one that's used in the game. And if you're curious, that means Axi, and that means an axe. That word right there. All right. So this is how I came up with the alphabet that was used for all of the ancient version of that language. And then there's still a few manuscripts that were handwritten using like the one from the Voynich manuscript. All right. So now that we have this, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. clicking on enough, it should be fine. How did I design it so that it can be deciphered by players? As I said, it's so important. So the first mechanic, I use two main mechanics for this. And the first one that I use is redundancy. And I'll show you with that example here of that word on the disk. If you're looking at this series of 4 glyphs, and you're looking at all of the texts that are given to you where there are translations given by the assassin linguist, you can find 2 texts where you find this exact sequence of 4. And it just so happens that the only word in common in these 2 translations is inside, right? So redundancy is basically introducing words that you want players to decipher in different texts and making sure that these texts are written in a way that there's only one word in common. And this way players can make the correlation. Right? So that's the number 1 mechanic that I use, and this is how you know that this means inside. Okay, the second one, the second mechanic is deduction. So here you have a sequence of characters or glyphs, right? And if you look at different sources where you can find it, all right? You can find it in that achievement or trophy picture, right? But the translation you have for this is the hidden truth, right? So does that mean the or hidden or truth? You don't know the language, you don't know how things are conjugated, you have no way of knowing, right? You can make a guess, but you don't have to. You don't have to because, come on, yep. Suspense. All right, so elsewhere in the game, you can find the same sequence of 4 characters and you have a translation. And this one says, what was true is untrue, right? What was true is untrue. You can find this here. So now you know that because it's repeated. So this is a different type of redundancy, right? It's redundancy within the same text, but it's written in a way where things are repeated every time. And if this would stop flickering, I would be very happy to show you that.
Try to see if something wrong with it.
Yeah. This seems better actually. Okay. Okay, so here you can see that redundancy in this particular text is like very, very present, right? Like what is true is untrue, what is done is undone. It is a one, not a rebellion. So it's like you have the verb to do is easy to identify, true is easy to identify. You have 3 negations in a row, right? True, untrue, done, undone, one, not rebellion. So it's very easy to see how negation is done, etc. So basically this particular text is packed with redundancy. And that gives you true, right? So you have a word here that says the hidden truth is not quite the same, but you have a root there that is in common. And if you are not completely sure about this, right? So, sorry, I said like, so you have true, and so that gives you the same root as here, so now you know that this must be truth, thus by deduction, this could be hidden or the, right? And how do you verify it? There's another text where the word hide is there and you find the same root, right? So deduction is basically elimination. Is I don't give you enough redundancy to deduct this one word, but I can give you enough redundancy to detect the other ones, and then by elimination you find the one that's missing. So these are the 2 mechanics: redundancy and deduction, or elimination if you want. And basically, if you combine them in different ways, so as I said, but like redundancy sometimes in the same text, sometimes in separate text. The elimination process can be over like 3 or 4 different texts. Sometimes it's just in one sentence, etc. You can combine them in any order you want. And this is how basically I built all of the puzzle. 2 simple mechanics combined in different ways, and then you get a whole range of different possibilities. Right, and this is how you can find this. This means hidden inside. All right, so just to conclude, some learnings that hopefully you can take away from this. First one is, as you can see, writing all of this content, which is lore content, right? Like all the texts are actually text that gives you info about the lore that are actually interesting to see on their own. But they are also written in a way that builds the redundancy, that builds this elimination process. So basically the mechanics and the content are one and the same. And this is something that I think is very applicable to many designs in games, right? It's like the closest you can get your lore and the interesting story to your game mechanics, the better. Because when people experience the mechanics, they experience the lore. When they are interested in the lore, they experience the mechanics. So it's feeding each other and making a much greater experience. Second one is the resonance of this was pretty large. The amount of people that were actively trying to solve it is counted in the thousands, right? And so thousands for a game like Assassin's Creed is not, like, we're talking about a game that sold more than 20 million copies. Only a few thousand people actually actively try to solve this. But these people were so engaged that content creators started to create content about it, that people wrote articles about it. The ripple effect was giganomous. And that's something that I think is applicable to many games where you don't need to do what you do for a lot of people, but if you really tailor it for what this audience is going to love, you're going to have a very strong impact. That can ripple to a very large effect. Right? So here, like, creating all this intricate lore and puzzles and everything, this was never meant to be for every AC player. This was meant for like the super core players that like puzzles, because in the series before there were puzzles not as complex as this one, but there were puzzles. And there are people that really dig this ancient civilization lore. Not everyone does. But if you tailor make what you make for people that are very specific in their taste, then these are going to get very passionate, and that's going to have a ripple effect. And then the last one is you saw how complex it was to retrofit everything within the IP. I just wish that people back then would have thought about the future. So that's just an advice for no matter how big your game, you never know what's going to pick up, right? It's like some things might have a success, and then future you might hate you because you just didn't think enough of if this continues, then what's up? So think of this. It's like it doesn't have to be the core of what you do. But this was really such a pain to try to retrofit everything. If only someone had thought about this, just to say, hey, we've used glyphs already, let's just reuse the same set of glyphs all the time, right? Which didn't happen. That's as simple as that. So that's it. That's the talk. Hopefully that was interesting.
Anyone has any questions?
Oh yeah, I have a question. So, given the ARG component of the game, right, where the players have to discover stuff like on the box of the case and all that, was there a contingency plan if the players did not actually crack the puzzle by a certain time frame?
Yeah. So there's two elements to this. One is this was designed to be a community effort. So we did hope that players would come together. It was made hard enough. I designed it to be hard enough. Actually, my playtest condition was if I playtest this with one person and they can solve it, then I'm not hard enough. Right? Then I need to make it more complex. So it's like part of this was we hoped that players coming together would help each other enough. But the contingency plan was if they get completely stuck and they give up on it, we had a bunch of clues that were already written in advance. And I was working with the com dev team, and so on Twitter, there were, actually for the first puzzle we did not need to do that, but for the second one and the third one, the one with the basilica and everything, we had actually to tweet clues because it was a bit long. So basically the timeline was, for the first one, we hoped that players would solve it within 2 to 3 months was our target. They did it within 2 months, which is on target. For the next one, we wanted it to be a bit faster, so like 1 month was the goal. And then after like 5 weeks where they were very clearly stuck, we started to basically unleash the clues, but they were planned in advance. We had a plan for them.
Ah, I see. Thanks so much. That's very interesting.
And we didn't need to, but had the need a reason, we could have basically find new clues to craft new clues and then give it to them. Because we did not want the thing to die. We wanted people to actually get the reward at the end.
So even if like the players did not pick up on, or like if there was not much interest in the language in the first place, was there like a kind of jump start that you guys had planned in order to get them, or was like the faith in the player base so strong that?
Yeah, so knowing your community is key, and like the AC community, at least the AC community from before the new direction with AC Origins going RPG, right? this is a community that was very much into like conspiracy theory and then trying to make theories about what things are and all. And there were a few big puzzles that were done back in AC Brotherhood and AC Unity actually. With AC Initiates was a whole site of like big puzzles and stuff. So we know that this is a community that were going to be into it. And that's why actually we seeded it in the main story. The main story seeds like the glyphs and everything so that we made sure that every single player is going to see it. And then having other elements of it here and there we thought was going to be enough for people to pick up that it's probably intentional, there's probably something there, and it worked. And we did not have a backup plan for that. So if they did not pick up on it, I guess we would have tweeted something.
All right.
All right.
If not, please give me a round of applause to give them point. Yeah. So now we are gonna have like maybe a 5 minutes break, and then we'll start the playtesting session proper. So you can go and like stretch your legs and everything.
For those who are here, there's a lucky draw code at the end of the talk, as always. And it's
Over here. Yeah, so you can key in on the website to get one extra chance in drawing the top 3 lucky draw prizes at the end of the ceremony.
Okay. So for you guys, right, those with the laptop, you guys can just set up at any of the desks. I believe there are power plugs all around. So just set them up. If you guys can use these 2 rows over here as well. Then once you guys have set up, right, then I guess we'll move around and we'll play each other games and let's see how you guys have.
Start at around 2 or 3.
Oh,
3 or 3.
I think I do, but I pushed it between.
Oh. Interesting.
I want to ask what he does in like.
The fact that everyone work together for 5 months.
I want to ask what he does in like.
Yeah, but like, the thing is, obviously, I wasn't doing that full time. Like, my job full time was game director, so yeah, it was exciting. So that's why it's but basically, creating the language itself is pretty here. And then, I guess, like in the last 3 months of creating the language, I really started to go into like designing the puzzles and everything. So that's it's like 3 months, but same thing. I used 3 months because I was doing the creations of the assets. It was like a month. This is basically it's text. It's just like text on a few things. You had like one person had to scream, this rock can only be broken with this weapon at this time of day, like that. Like so, it's very simple. And that was and the assets on the box and everything, like the artists were already creating the box. I just sent them like a bunch of text to add. Because it's very simple, I created the font where it's just have the text. I think Wings very specifically for like the language and everything. I think that's very specific to like this particular thing. I don't think it's suited for every single game. That's why I put that as part of the learning. I think having small things that won't matter very much to most of your player base, but will matter very, very much for a dedicated NC. To me, that's worth. And that's kind of like the thing. If you looked at this before the results that it reached millions of players, right, it's like the ROI of this, the directors were this time, yes, it's cheap, but also like these people have tons of things to do. You can argue that doing something for just a few thousand players might be very basically like it can be for me that's more the takeaway rather than like very specific language. It's like this is a community that loves puzzle, that's why this is a
So it becomes more common.
I don't think so, because again, it's like, this is why I'm saying is like making a language for a game, that's not what you need to take away from this. What you need to take away from this is know something that your audience is going to be very passionate about, and it's okay to invest, some things that might be too niche, but actually, and because here it's about resonance, it's about finding something that people are going to get very passionate about. I doubt very much that this is going to be, can you get too much of something you really, really love? Maybe not. That's something that I think at Riot we do a lot, is small things, and small things is like, it's not just, puzzles but it's putting in references, putting in like clues on, recently there was a whole parent relationship thing, I don't know if you follow that. Like a raise and kill joy in a relationship is like noticed for like a year, and now there was a revelation we have together. And there's a big part of the community that wants to play a tactical shooter, they don't care. But there's a tiny part of that community that is extremely passionate about these characters and their relationships and everything. And for them it was absolutely huge, so huge that there's been articles.
Irving is with Xiang, Jin Xiang and Elon.
In the case of Valorant, the cost of it is 4 pictures that they posted on Twitter and like 5 to 6 voice lines in the game. Like during the pre-match, there's a bunch of banter that's happening, right? And there were like 4, I think 5 or 6 lines that were specifically hinting at this relationship. That's it, right? It's like 5, 6 voice lines plus the triggers to play them, like 4 or 5 pictures. But then you can always argue, well, these illustrators, they could be doing splash outs for champs for league instead, right? So is it a good investment? Well, the answer to me is yes, it's a good investment. The relationship were established. It's more hard. We create like a nice engaging history around it. If you just take it from the standpoint, like, here's the new agent, there's a new agent. That's it.
I want to ask what you asked already. Because I told you already. No, those are their own company lah.
If you keep some things not completely secret,
I came here to play games only. I don't have the game.
In your group?
I'm not here. I came alone. Sad.
I thought when you said you're coming late, I thought you mean like 2 plus.
By coming late, I mean I was not coming for the anime.
No one was there. No one came.
No one came.
Yeah, no one came.
No one from our class came.
Hey, wait, you're not.
Yeah, they haven't
You never pause.
Yeah.
I heard you pause.
Are you sure?
full-time job.